repeatedly. They were totally unable to cause any pretext in the form of corruption to be found because he was trustworthy. Indeed, no negligence in the form of corruption was found against him. Therefore, these men, the conspirators, concluded we will never be able to cause a pretext to be found against this Daniel unless we cause it to be found in connection with a law originating from his God. Consequently, these supervisors, as well as the satraps, conspired together to the detriment of the king and said the following to the king: King Darius, live forever. Each and every one of the supervisors over the kingdom, namely the senior officials, as well as the satraps, that is, the royal officials, in other words, the governors, are in agreement that the king should issue an edict, specifically an interdict, which should be enforced in order that whoever makes a request from any god or human being during a 30-day period, except from you, O king, must be unceremoniously deposited into a lion's den. Now, please, O king, establish an interdict. Specifically, please sign the document in a law in order that it can never be changed according to Medo-Persian law, which can never be revoked. Because of this, King Darius signed the document in a law, that is the interdict. Now, when Daniel was aware that the document was signed into law, he entered his home, which had windows in its upper room swung open toward Jerusalem, because he was going to pray toward Jerusalem in accordance with what King Solomon taught in 1 Kings chapter 8. Then he worshiped, Daniel did, on his knees 3 times during the day, that very day that the interdict was signed into law. Indeed, as was his custom prior to the interdict being signed into law, he prayed while giving thanks in the presence of his God, just as he had been doing previously. Then these men conspired together, namely they found Daniel making requests, specifically making an earnest and urgent prayer request in the presence of his God. Consequently, they came into the king's presence and posed the question with regards to the interdict issued by the king. Did you not sign an interdict, namely, that any person who makes a request from any god or human being during a 30-day period, except from you, O king, must be unceremoniously deposited into a lion's den? The king replied and said, absolutely. The decree is according to Medo-Persian law, which can never be revoked. Thus they replied, the conspirators, in the presence of the king, and said that Daniel, who is one of the deported people from Judah, has absolutely no respect for your command, O king. That is, for your interdict, which you signed into law. Instead, 3 times during the course of the day, he regularly makes his request. Consequently, when the king heard the charge against him, he was extremely upset. Thus, with regards to Daniel, he was determined to deliver him. Indeed, until sunset, he repeatedly made every effort to rescue him. Then these men conspired together to the detriment of the king and said to the king, please remember, O king, that with regards to Medo-Persian law, each and every interdict, specifically edict, which the king does issue, is irrevocable. Therefore, the king issued an order for the purpose of causing Daniel to be brought in to be unceremoniously deposited into a lion's den. The king encouraged Daniel and said, as he was being let down, your God, because you yourself, Daniel, serve him faithfully, will rescue you, expressing the faith of the king and Daniel's God. Now look at verse 17. Now, if you notice, in my translation, it said verse 17. That's because the Aramaic, the numbering in the Aramaic text, the original, is different from the English text, as we pointed out. So Daniel 5:31 is actually Daniel 6:1 in the original text, and all the way through chapter 6. Chapter 7, it's okay. They correspond. Now look at Daniel 6:17 in your English Bibles, which is verse 18 in the Aramaic text. A stone was brought and laid over the mouth of the den, of the lion's den. Sound familiar? And the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signet rings of his nobles, so that nothing would be changed in regards to Daniel. Now, when it says a stone was brought over the mouth of the lion, over the den, not over the lion, over the den, what that is, there's a word missing there that's not translated, the conjunction wa. It's actually marking the next action after the events recorded in Daniel chapter 6, verse 16. So therefore, this sentence here in verse 17 is telling us the next action, the next action that took place after Darius encouraged Daniel that his God would rescue him after the king gave the order to execute Daniel. So this is the next event after the king encouraged Daniel. Now, the word stone there, it's the word eben, and it's translated stone, and it's correctly translated. And then we have the word Cod, excuse me. Here, and I'll point out why it's not the best translation. They translate it as an indefinite article in English, which is the indefinite article in English is a. The definite article is the. This is a. So here, I'm going to show you. It's not. Shouldn't be a. That would make it sound like it was any old stone. No, it was a particular stone used for this particular purpose. So the word eben means stone or a rock. It's referring to a large rock. A rock large enough to cover the opening to the lion's den, and don't miss this, and heavy enough to prevent it being moved by just one person. So this word is modified, as I said before, by the adjective cod, which shouldn't be translated like with an indefinite article, but a certain particular is the way we should translate it, emphasizing that this stone was a certain particular stone which was used to seal this lion's den when executing a criminal. Now, as I said, some expositors and interpreters, they argue that this adjective cod has a weakened force and therefore should be translated as an indefinite article, the letter A. However, it's better to view this adjective as marking out this stone as a certain particular stone that was used to seal the lion's den, since it could not be just any old stone lying around, but one that was sufficient to prevent the escape of Daniel or hinder somebody attempting to rescue him. So it can't. What I'm saying is, it can't be a just any old stone. When you translate it a stone, it's like, okay, I just pick up the stone and boom. It has to be a particular stone that is heavy enough to prevent one person from moving it, and is big enough to seal the lion's den. All right. So it would be a particular stone. So I don't agree with it being translated Now, if you want to disagree with me, fine. I mean, let's go ahead. If you want to be in the wrong, I'm just kidding. I'm being funny. That was my sense of humor. So then it says, and laid it over the mouth of the den. It says, Daniel 6:17, a stone was brought and laid over the mouth of the den. Now that statement is a purpose clause, and laid over the mouth of the den. It presents the purpose of a large stone being brought to the mouth of the lion's den. So you could translate this statement, a certain particular stone was brought in order to be laid over the mouth of the den. Not but in order to be laid over the mouth of the den. Because how do I know that? Is that just something I just pulled out of the top of my hat? No. If you compare clauses to clauses, you can see, you can analyze. You have to compare clauses with clauses. Is this a result? Is this a purpose? You got to look at it, and you got to compare the two statements. What statements are we talking about? A stone was brought in, and then the other statement, and laid over the mouth of the den. How are they related to each other? Is it a result clause, and laid over the mouth of the den? No. If you look at it, it's more like a purpose. Why didn't the translators do that? They leave it open for interpretation. If you want to translate it in, that's fine, but it's actually a purpose clause. So we could translate it in order to be laid over the mouth of the den. Then we have the statement, and the king, which is interesting, and we'll talk a little bit about, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signet rings of his nobles. Now that statement is marking the next action that took place in the execution of Daniel. So that here's the order of the execution. They let Daniel down. They unceremoniously deposit him into the lion's den. They probably took a rope, tied it around him, dump him down there. Then they pull the rope up. Then they go up, or they cut it, and then they got this certain particular stone that was heavy enough to it would have to take more than one person to move it, maybe a couple, and big enough to cover the entrance to the lion's den. Covered it up. Then the king and the nobles, they would seal the tomb, and then the king and the nobles would would have clay tablets, and they would put their signet rings on the thing. But anyways, I like to think of them doing this, with the king's back turned. Daniel's dead, That's what I think they're doing. So anyways, the signet ring. Like that one, Cheyenne? The signet ring, Izkah. The word for signet ring in the Aramaic is one word, Izkah. And that refers to a ring worn on the finger that personally seals and validates official business of the kingdom. So we haven't found too many. Archaeology hasn't found too many of these signet rings. They're hard to find in archaeology. They haven't seen a lot of them, but they have them. Just a ring, and it has a thing there where you can impress onto the moist clay tablets, affix your seal to it, the nobles and the king, and that means anybody breaks this seal, you're going to be under arrest and you'll be executed. You'll be dinner. You'll be kitty cat food. That's what you'll be. So then it says, so that nothing could be changed in regard to Daniel. So it's telling us this phrase, so that nothing would be changed in regard to Daniel, presents the purpose of Darius the Mede and his nobles sealing the large heavy stone which was placed over the mouth of the lion's den with his signet ring and the signet rings of the nobles. So what the signet ring would say is nothing can change with regards to Daniel. Daniel can't get out. Okay? Daniel can't, there's no way Daniel can escape. The king can't get him loose. Nobody can. Okay? This is saying that Daniel, the death sentence has been signed. It can't be changed. It's irrevocable. That's what the signet rings are expressing. It's irrevocable. It can't be changed, this execution. And again, I'm sure they were jumping up for joy in their heads, those conspirators. When it says nothing could be changed, that's a couple of words three words in the Aramaic, and this is the last bit of Aramaic for the evening. We have the negative particle law, which is negating. It's translated here nothing, and then it's negating the meaning of the verb, the second person masculine singular pa'al imperfect form of the verb shena, which is translated here change. It's negated by that negative particle law, which is emphatic. And then we have the noun sepu, which is not translated by the New American Standard. Sepu means matter, and it refers to the execution of Daniel. And the verb shena means to change in the sense of state or condition being altered, and it's emphatically negated by the marker of emphatic negation or prohibition law. And therefore, these two words denote that the king sealed the large heavy stone placed over the mouth of the lion's den with his signet ring and the signet rings of his nobles in order that Daniel's situation. Undoubtedly, the conspirators who were the king's nobles were chuckling to themselves that they rid themselves of Daniel. However, little did they know that Daniel's God was about to intervene and deliver him, thus sealing their fate, since Darius immediately orders their execution after Daniel's deliverance. Now, the sealing of the stone, which was placed over the mouth of the lion's den, reminds us of the Roman seal, which was affixed to the large rock which was placed over the tomb of Jesus by Pilate at the request of the scribes and the Pharisees. This Roman seal would serve to prevent the theft of the body of the Lord Jesus, and the breaking of it would result in the death penalty. Now, this seal, like the seal Darius, which he affixed to the large heavy rock over the mouth of the lion's den, was no match for the omnipotence of God. The same divine power that raised the Lord Jesus from the dead served to shut the mouths of the lions, just as the Roman seal served to magnify the miracle of raising Jesus from the dead. So the Medo-Persian seal would serve to magnify the miracle of delivering Daniel from the mouth of the lions. What do I mean by magnifying? That seal meant you couldn't get any, nobody could get in, and nobody could get out. But Jesus was empty, the tomb was empty, and the stone was moved. As I said before, and many times, the Romans and the Jews made sure the Romans sealed that tomb and made sure there was no way possible that Peter and the apostles can come by and scoop up Jesus and say, "Hey, he's risen from the dead." So here's the greatest conspiracy, people, in the world today. It's not that JFK was killed with a conspiracy, or his brother, or Martin Luther King, or there's a conspiracy of 9/11. Guys, the greatest conspiracy is that Satan is trying to prevent people knowing that Jesus did rise from the dead. That tomb was empty, and it was in the interest of both the Romans and the Jews to make sure that tomb was filled. They didn't want Jesus out. And don't tell me the apostles were going to take him out. You think Peter, and everybody who ran from Jesus, now they're going to stand up to the Roman guard? Are you kidding me? Not. But all of a sudden they were bold as brass after the tomb was empty. What happened? They ran into the resurrected Christ. Paul. He was the worst arch enemy of the church. He persecuted Christians. He was holding the cloaks of those who killed Stephen, the first martyr of the church. And he did a 180, and now he wrote over half the New Testament and died for the cause of Christ at the hands of the Romans, got decapitated for Jesus. How do you account for that? How do you account for a guy who was against Jesus now turning against Jesus because he ran into the resurrected Christ? That's why.